Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Monk Chat session hosted by Empty Cloud Monastery. This evening, we're very happy to have with us a special guest, Ayya Santacitta, one of our beloved elders in the Western Theravada Buddhist community. So welcome, Ayya. So good to have you with us this evening.
Thank you.
So Ayya Santacitta has been a monastic for, gosh, how long now? 30-something years?
93, yeah, almost 30 years.
Almost 30 years, wow.
Sadhu.
Yeah, since I was a child, so that's quite remarkable. As usual with our Monk Chat sessions, this is the opportunity to ask any questions that you have related to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and we'll be happy to put them up for Ayya Santacitta to speak about. And maybe we can kick this off by just asking Ayya Santacitta if you'd like to tell us a bit about your upcoming project. So you're recently embarking on a new Dharma project that we would all love to hear more about. So Ayya, could you please tell us a bit about your new project?
Okay, so, first I just want to say my mother language is German. I'm born in Austria. So my English is a little bit maybe like Ayya Soma's English, which you're already used to. So I'm sure you can get used to that. And yeah, I'm currently living in a monastery in the Sierra foothills, which is very much impacted by climate change. As I'm sitting here looking out the window, there's a lot of smoke out there, and we have a very huge fire, the mosquito fire, which is about like 30 to 40 miles away from us. And we might have to evacuate again. We had to evacuate last year. So our situation is very impacted by that. And that's it's one of the reasons, why I want to start with this new project, which I'm going to call the Aloka Earth Room. And I envision, to do a contemporary temple space, a small one, and, synthesizing Dhamma, ecology, and art. And I would like to go to the North Bay. That's like the area north of the Golden Gate Bridge, from San Francisco up, that in direction Vancouver. So that's going to be like about maybe 30, 40, 20 miles north of San Francisco. I'm not quite sure yet where it's going to be. And yeah, in my past, before I became a nun, I worked as a performer in avant-garde dance theater and also studied cultural anthropology, specialized on dance and ritual. And as I'm now becoming older, I feel like, I'd like to synthesize all of what I've learned this lifetime with Buddha Dhamma and trying to find more contemporary expressions for that. And the climate crisis is really very close to my heart because I feel it's a huge mirror for where we really need to put our attention. And I think, the Buddhist teaching has such pragmatic set of tools which we can use. And I feel like the earth and the climate crisis is showing us, where we are totally off the mark. So bringing those two together, I think can be very, very helpful because I feel, the climate crisis is a result of a distorted relationship with nature. And nature is shouting at us, 24/7, but somehow we can't really hear it because we are just so disconnected from what's really going on, totally lost in our stories. And then I'd like to also introduce art, as a means of communication, which does not only depend on the mind, on the dualistic mind, on speaking, but using other avenues, and, filling old wine into new bottles, what you're also doing at Empty Cloud, it's just like yet another attempt to make the whole thing more digestible. The bitter medicine of transforming the mind and the heart, delivered with some kind of coding, so it goes down easier. That's the plan. And I'm just at the very beginning and haven't found a location yet. And I'll hope it's going to bear fruit, because I think that would be a very useful place, in other locations as well, because I feel, the climate crisis is not going to go away. It's not going to magically just stop. It's going to become more and more intense. Yeah. And we really need to prepare ourselves to hear what the earth is telling us,
Okay, well, thank you, Ayya. And we have a question here from one of our viewers. So Jerry asks, what is the role of wholesome desire in the quest for stream entry? Please provide a few examples.
I mean, one, I'm not sure if I can provide a few examples, but I can certainly, provide one. I think one very good avenue, to approach that is to look at your own mind and look at the first three fetters, which are belief in rites and rituals, skeptical doubt about the teaching, and, personality view, those three, to just really look into your mind as you are living and interacting and relating, how they are showing up or not showing up in your mind. And that's a very good way how we can investigate, where we are still stuck and where we can put our attention. And, that can only be really energized, that kind of investigation, if we do have a certain amount of chanda. Chanda is the word for wholesome desire, as opposed to, tanha, which is thirst or craving. And, that wholesome desire, which is, which is inspired by the knowledge of, the very special opportunity of having a human birth. And also, seeing the complexity of samsara and how impossible it is. It can't be fixed, But what we can do is we can, if you want to speak about fixing anything, we can fix our minds and our hearts. And through that, we are, ever more kind of less impacted by all of that, and be able to be more of help to others, by supporting them to find their way as well. And at one point, not coming back. So there's certainly, without a certain motivation or wholesome desire, the practice is not going to go anywhere very much, because we need that, because it's too difficult. It's too painful to question, everything. If you don't have that desire, which might have been aroused, by meeting somebody you found very inspiring, or by reading something, or hearing something, or seeing a piece of art, or whatever it is, where we feel that heart wish, rising up, because you're recognizing this is something, this has true value, and I want it. So when I met my first teacher many years ago, Ajahn Buddhadasa, I felt like, he had that, what I'd call the unshakability of the heart, what's very clearly embodied by him. And I felt I want that too, And then in the beginning, I didn't know how kind of what a long trail that was and all of that. But I never forget, I still can recall that feeling, when for the first time, when I knew, that's what I've always been looking for, in so many different places where it wasn't really there, like all of the things I did where I tried, and it didn't never really work. And then when I saw him and also other people, where I felt they are really embodying it, then I had that the heart leaping up, yay, that's it, And without that, I would not be a nun anymore, because it's too hard, Whenever it gets like really hard, then I just remember that. So that's my answer.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Ayya.
Yeah.
And we have another question here from Richard. Richard asks, how can I cultivate more mindfulness when the mind is overwhelmed by an unwholesome environment?
I think, maybe, just bringing your awareness to how you're feeling in this moment. When you're in an unwholesome environment, you're most likely going to feel certain amount of aversion, or a certain amount of wanting to not be here, wanting to shut down and all of that. And, and understanding that this is like a natural capacity of the mind also to protect itself, and protect itself from being traumatized or re-traumatized. And, knowing that there is a certain intelligence in that, but then at the same time, if there's an environment where these reactions are triggered, then maybe, finding a way not to go in those unwholesome environments, and go into environments which are supporting an opening of the mind, a natural opening of the mind. And then, just, of course, sometimes, we don't have a choice. We have to go certain places and might be connected with our work and so on and so forth. But just seeing, is it truly an unwholesome environment, or is it just feeling like in an unwholesome environment because certain conditionings are triggered, which are maybe connected with some early trauma in ourselves. So, we don't really know if an environment per se is unwholesome, or if it's just triggering unwholesome response for us. There's a difference there. And if it's truly unwholesome, because there is some infringement of the 5 precepts or so on an ongoing basis, so then I just wouldn't go there if I could. And if you immediately can't make a change, then working towards that change. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ayya. And we have a 3-part question here from Jay Sohi. Not sure how to pronounce this. It says, do you know the difference between enjoying life and being entertained by it? I know me and many other people struggle with craving for entertainment, and it's also against the precepts if you're a nun or monk to look out for entertainment. So how then can you even enjoy life if you are bored all the time? You as a nun can't even be entertained by teaching the Dhamma or receiving questions, right? How does that work?
Well, that's like a ridiculous question, I think. That's like Silabhata Paramasa, believing in rites and rituals. It's not like, if I'm enjoying something, that doesn't mean, that I'm entertaining myself, because entertainment, has that, I think, I would qualify. It's also, first we need to define what is entertainment. And for me, entertainment is, I would qualify it as something, which can be used, for distracting. And enjoyment, is a natural part of life. And joy is one of the 7 factors of awakening. Without joy, the practice is not going to go anywhere, because joy is that gives the practice that buoyancy, so that the mind and the heart can open. So no joy, no insight, that belongs together. And it doesn't need to be like a, crazy big joy, but just like that subtle joy of a mind, which is not hampered by craving. This is a very subtle joy which one can learn to identify, in the practice. And I think that's really important, because if the mind starts to identify that subtle joy, which is a result of not wanting anything in the moment, then it's, it finds its way back to that joy easier. So, and yes, we do have that as a precept, about, not getting lost in entertainment. But, sometimes it can be very skillful, if the mind is like very heavy, or there is just some, very difficult mind state has arisen. Sometimes it can be the right thing, to say, now I just want to have like a cup of tea or something with my friend, and enjoy that contact, for example. Or I want to go out and want to go on a walk, or, something in order to uplift the mind. It's always the intention behind what we are doing. If you're doing it because you want to distract yourself, and, you don't want to, basically practice with what has arisen, then, and you do that like on a regular basis, it becomes a habit. For example, certain relationship to the internet and all of those things. But if you do it like in a very selective way from time to time, because it can help, to uplift and open the mind, that I would see that as a skillful means. And it's just important, not to fool oneself about it. And I think, maybe in the early, times of the practice, one needs to be more careful. But as one gets to know oneself better, then I think it becomes more, part of skillful means, which we can use. And for example, what you're saying here, you can't even be entertained from teaching the Dhamma or receiving questions. I think that's a very funny question for me, and I'm entertained because it's how do you even how do you think like that? Of course, if I feel like I have a good relationship, with somebody who asks me a question, and I can answer that question in a way that person feels they have really, received something from me, and I feel a certain amount of joy about that. I think that's a very good thing, But if I would only come here, in order to be the one, who is answering the questions because I'm so wonderful or something like that, that would be not very good motivation, And I think the most important thing is, yes, joy is the force factor of awakening, Mindfulness, investigation of dhammas or interest, energy, joy, tranquility, stability, and perspective. And, if the mind isn't experiencing a certain amount of that subtle joy, it will not settle. Because through, really being in contact with our experience, so really being in relationship with our experience, there is a sense of enrichment which comes from not wanting to be somewhere else, And that enrichment allows the mind to calm down. And then if the mind calms down, it starts to be able to focus and to become stable. And then if the mind is stable, it has a sense of perspective. And then, if the mind has a sense of perspective, it's more capacity for mindfulness again. So that's like a spiral, going ever deeper into reality. And joy is part of that process. And it's not a joy which comes through the senses, but it's what the Buddha calls a non-worldly joy, which comes from not wanting to be somewhere else, not wanting anything else but what is right now. And and then one can experience that in meditation, Okay.
Great. Thank you, Ayya, for that very entertaining answer. And
I hope I don't get in trouble because of that.
I mean, if you got in trouble, then I'm already in trouble 100 times over.
Okay.
So Dave asks, hello, Venerable Trio. When we take, that's the three of us, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
When we take our third refuge in the Sangha, can you give some examples to bring to the mind's eye? I've heard taking refuge in the Sangha of realized beings.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, you could, bring to mind like a teacher whom you know, for example, where you feel really inspired by them, or for example, the Arahant Bhikkhunis, the female disciples of the Buddha, which the Buddha has been, mentioning for their particular special qualities, or any other teachers or like ancestors, But then for me also, and in the classic traditional sense, one says, there is the Arya Sangha, Sangha of realized being from stream mantra up to Arahant or Buddha, all of those, and then there's also the Sangha, the community with whom we interact and with whom we, kind of rub up against each other and learn as we go along. That's another Sangha, and then for me also, the whole planet is also my Sangha in a way, because my body, is not separate from the planet. My body is in constant exchange through earth element, eating, water element, drinking, fire element, warmth and cold, and the breathing, the wind element, and then also space element. There's a constant exchange, and we never cut the umbilical cord to the planet. So we are in constant exchange, constant coming and going, a process, So there's many different levels of Sangha, and traditionally it's the Arya Sangha, yeah. But actually, I take refuge in planet Earth every day, because I depend on that in everything, every moment. And that gives me a sense of awe, and at the same time, I feel a sense of responsibility because I'm getting so much, I want to give something back. And if I can put myself in the position of giving something back, that only is going to be successful if my mind is, okay, if my mind isn't completely lost in the past and lost in my conditioning. And if I can, build a relationship to life, which is not all centered around me and mine, but which is just like able to be open and to receive, through building relationship with myself and with everything around me, which is like different levels of Sangha, of community. Some are seen, some are unseen. And also, the whole teaching has been handed down to us since 2,500 years, also through the Sangha. And just making that also conscious, what a amazing, lineage of ancestors we are part of, that we can sit here today and speak about this.
Okay, well, thank you, Ayya. And we can move on to the next question here. So one whole of a guy asks, how do I transition from insight into the tilakkhana of a particular sankhara to recognizing the tilakkhana as universal attributes of all sankharas?
Well, in the way that you are observing, that all mental formations, they are arising and ceasing. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end, So I think impermanence is always the entrance gate, I think in you're observing your mind, seeing that, and then, reflecting on, yes, that which is impermanent is unsatisfactory, dukkha, and that which is dukkha is not a real separate anything, but it's empty of a self and constantly changing. And I think, in the beginning, it's a more like structured investigation, and then through, kind of doing it over the years, it becomes more and more intuitive, that we don't anymore have to, kind of cut it like into 3 parts and so on and so forth, but it's all like, it's an intuitive knowing, which starts to, become an automatic way of looking at our experience. It's not, in the beginning, it's more like intellectual, and then over time, over the years, it just starts to sink in ever deeper. Yeah.
Okay,
And they are all, sorry, they are all, you could say, they are all, it's like the raft, which is carrying us to the other shore. And then in the end of the day, even the tilakana, even these instructions, they have to be let go of, because they are also concepts, they are also sankharas. And they are signposts, which can give us an idea, look like this, but then if you get stuck on the signpost, then you're not seeing where the signpost is pointing, and that would be pointless, So it's like the finger pointing to the moon, the classic, saying in the Zen tradition. But then you have to really look there, not getting stuck on the finger, but using it as a raft, and then, it eats itself up basically in the process. And that is insight, realizing or recognizing intuitively these 3 characteristics, that is insight itself, that's the insight practice. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question from Indika. Please explain the Madhupindika Sutta.
Well, I don't know by heart right now the content of it, but Bante, might you give me a little summary?
So this is
you, Bante, you can explain it maybe.
Thank you for passing me a question. So the Madhupindika Sutta is, briefly speaking, it's talking about how we have a sensory experience. So we see something or hear something or smell something or so on. And then we start forming concepts and ideas about that sensory experience. And then we start thinking about it. And we start generating internal stories and getting completely wrapped up in these increasingly complicated internal stories, which is what we call papancha, or proliferation. So that's briefly what the Madhupindika Sutta is about. It's talking about how instead of just letting what we see just be seeing, instead we generate these increasingly complicated internal stories about our sensory experiences. And we take those stories way too seriously. And as a result, we wind up generating a lot of dukkha. So that's briefly my summary of the discourse.
Okay. Thank you. That's very clear. I remember now. And yeah, I think you, Bante, already said it quite clearly, somehow, drifting into this thinking and making up stories is kind of a defense, of really being with our experience, because we are feeling beings. We are having a lot of capacity to feel, as being born in the human realm, and also being born as an animal, we are actually animals, we are mammals, having an animal body, which is very sensitive, to all kinds of feelings. And generally there is like pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And what we want to train ourselves in is that we can step out from that frantically running after wanting more pleasant feeling, running away from unpleasant feeling, and not being aware of neutral feeling. And for example, if there's a lot of unpleasant feeling in the body, let's say we get triggered by something and then feel in the solar plexus like a very strong feeling. What we usually do is we split the energy off into the head and just thinking, because we can't stay with the experience, because it scares us, because we feel like we can't bear it. It's too much. We can't bear it, but we actually can, But if we have had, certain undigested traumatic experiences which we bring in, from earlier from our life, and every little baby has a certain amount of that, when they come out of their mother for the first time. That's a huge, however skillful that might have been conducted, but still it's like a huge change, which is scary, because a child can't think, doesn't understand what's going on. So there is like a certain layers of trauma in our energy bodies, which when we are touching on those, because they get triggered through some kind of experience in the meditation or outside of the meditation, then what we usually do, if the mind is not trained, we split the energy, that pull energy here, which is painful or scary. We split it off in the head and think, because we are afraid of feeling. So then as soon as you remember it, as soon as you become aware, wow, I'm again completely caught up in my story, maybe after 1 hour, after 1 minute, who knows how long it's going to take, then you just try to calm down again and just pay attention to how it feels in the body. Stepping out of the story. And sometimes, if there's a lot of undigested material, sometimes we might need some additional skillful means, like upayas, they call it in the Pali language, some therapeutic support or some other kind of skillful means, Tai Chi or yoga, or there's so many different means, how we can learn to make friends with the energetic experience of what it means, to be a human being, So, and the Matabhinika Sutta, is a very kind of early example of that approach, which is still very valid. And now these days, we have many different people out there in the world, who are also helping, with supporting people working with the energy bodies, and meditation is not like, an automatic strategy which can fix all problems. And sometimes we need other skillful means, to enable ourselves to really meditate, and not just, think we are meditating. Yeah. I hope that was clear enough.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question from Jay Sohi. Says, I know that you can't steal physical possessions, but are there any other ways in which the precept of stealing might be violated? In other words, could you give an analysis of the precept of stealing in terms of body, speech, and mind?
The precept is only relates to stealing of physical objects, which, and it's defined in the Parimokkha, in the Vinaya of the monks and nuns. It means, if you take an object which would be in your society where you took it, if that would have any repercussions in terms of the law, So let's say if I take like a sheet of paper in the office when I go to empty cloud, I don't think, the law would make a big deal out of that. So that'd be okay, But if I take something, let's say I, take an object without asking and take it away, from there, which would result in some kind of persecution by the law, then I would have broken that precept. And or if I, let's say, would use something, a piece of art or something which has a copyright on it, and I use it and use it somewhere in my teaching or something without mentioning the person, who created it and without asking permission, that would also be that. So that kind of thing, but speech, I don't think with speech and mind you could definitely, make a case, but it would not be featuring in the Vinaya as something which would have any repercussions.
Okay, thank you. And Jaso, he asks, what is your opinion on common sense? Is it real?
Well, the thing is common sense. I mean, I think everybody would have like depending on the situation, everybody might be asked 10 people and they might all have a slightly different take of what common sense is. I don't really, it's certainly not real, because, but I feel like there's the 5 precepts, and that's for me the foundation of about everything, in terms of the practice. If you can, build your life inside of the 5 precepts, that would be the definition of common sense for me, as a Buddhist. Because you're protecting yourself and you're protecting others at the same time. And I very much like the definition, giving the gift of fearlessness to the world, and not thinking it's all about you, but it's a commons, the planet is a commons. It belongs to all of us, not only to human beings, but to animals and to plants and to the rivers and the mountains, and it's there for everyone. And we need to clear up and clean up our minds so we can really understand that.
Okay, thank you. And we have a question from Feza, who says, if there are no desires in the Brahma realm, then how different is perception, feeling, and life in that world?
I mean, there are desires, just very, I have never been in the Brahma realm, I don't remember. And there's certainly a certain amount of desire still left, very, very subtle, but still there. And because it's not, a full awakening, full letting go of all desire, basically. This is, there's still an attachment to what's called, fine material realm. And, that's like a certain level also in the jhana practice. And the other question, I can't really answer that. It's all speculation, really. I think it's much more important to worry about, if you worry about anything, about your relationship to the planet Earth right now, not to the Brahma realm, because we need to, as long as we have a human body, we need to kind of clear up our relationship with this realm. And it's considered, in the Buddha's teaching, that the human realm is the most fortunate realm for practice, because the mixture between pleasure and pain is such that we have a certain amount of leisure for practice, that you can show up here online and have the time. And then at the same time also we are spurred on by the suffering we experience. Whereas in the Brahma realm, there's so much ease. The Brahma gods, they don't feel much inspired to practice because everything is so easeful and wide open and so on. So I imagine it to be like that, from what I've read in the scriptures. And they don't have much incentive to practice until shortly before it ends, and they're going to drop down wherever they're going to drop down next. And then it's a bit late in the game, and there's fear and remorse, that they didn't practice. Whereas we, or at least I have enough dukkha, I have certainly quite some motivation to practice, because otherwise I wouldn't be a nun after 30 years still, If I would be in the Brahma realm, it might have been I might just hang out there, endlessly, enjoying myself. So, okay, I'm not a specialist on those realms, I must admit. I'm more concerning myself with living on planet Earth these days, because that's where I am.
Okay, makes sense. And on that note, we have a couple questions related to climate change. So this one says, can you recommend an appropriate response when dealing with climate change deniers and or people sharing conspiracy theories?
Yeah. I would say don't waste your time, just move on. Because it's not, if people these days still belong to any of those two groups, then I think just let it be, That's my recommendation. And, put your energy into something more beneficial. Because, those climate change deniers and conspiracy theories, there will be always probably some of those people because they have a very strong need, for not, because of a lot of fear, I suppose, And I think with kindness, not trying to steamroll them into anything, but just giving them some kindness and then invest your energy in a different way. There's so much out there to do anyway. That's what I would say.
Okay. And somewhat related question, this one says, can you share some words of advice for monastics who are concerned about the environment and want to safeguard the planet, but at the same time do not want to lose track of the supreme goal?
Great question, great question. Because, that it's completely possible, it's the, concerning ourselves with what's going on and trying, to help to bring more awareness, at the same time also tells us a lot about, the way things are, the three characteristics, for example, and as we know, full realization of those equals the supreme goal. So, and I think, the planet herself displays the three characteristics in a constant manner. And then, the freedom which we can gain from practicing in that way, we can take that into our work, For example, maybe sometimes I, for example, use when I have opportunities to go on demonstrations, I know that if I show up at the demonstrations, people will look, because I'm looking kind of a bit different than most people. And also like I bring in the archetype, of the samana, we say, in the Pali language, but I could also say like the archetype of the wise woman or wise man, and just trying to, and I wouldn't even say, it's not about safeguarding the planet, because I don't think the planet needs me to safeguard her, because she is much too powerful. I'm just like a little blip, if I'm anything. But it's more about, raising awareness about the need for us, to switch out of a very, very outmoded way of experience ourselves, like a myth, all kind of all historical ages on this planet, they always have certain underlying myths, through which we experience our life. And I think, we are in the end phase of patriarchy, I would say, where there is this very deep-seated assumption of there is like this very powerful hero father up there who tells us, what to do and where to go, and who judges between good and bad. And then down here, there's this huge mother, who doesn't have any needs herself and who is just there to provide and to carry everyone. And she's so powerful in some way that she doesn't need anything. And then there's kind of a fear of her, which is quite unconscious, I think. And, the whole misogyny and everything what's going on is a result of that kind of very childish, in a way, worldview, of having these two parents, the powerful father who is like protecting you and giving you direction, and a powerful mother who doesn't need anything and just feeding and giving and giving and giving. And we are just like in between, and I feel we have to start to let go of that worldview. There are no parents, we are the ones we are waiting for, and we are part of the planet, and we can become what's called in the environmental movement, what I really like, that expression of, we can become the immune system, of the planet. We can start to wake up and snap out of those very childish way of relating, and saying, no, I'm gonna grow up. I'm not like a toddler or a teenager, who just taking and not wanting to take any responsibility for, dealing with the garbage and taking on some chores and so on. So I just want to take on some chores, I want to take some responsibility, not only taking, but also giving something back. Because, through the practice, in particular, through realizing the three characteristics, or tilakana, how it's called also, understanding, we are not separate entities, who are walking around on planet Earth like on a stage, and say, I want more of this and I don't want that and blah, 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 and throwing a tantrum and all of that if you don't get what you want. But it's more like, no, it's absolutely not like that, I am just actually planet Earth walking around, and within 7 years, all the atoms in my body are changed, through eating and going to the bathroom and drinking and sweating and bleeding and everything, And that's like, for me, that's the most powerful concept of how I can actually approach what is called emptiness or not self in Buddhism, that how this body is in constant exchange with the planet. That's emptiness in action, And I think the deeper that is realized, the more we also will be able to contribute, because it's not like something we can necessarily, kind of intellectually figure out, because it's so complex, But this whole process, which we call Dhamma or Dhammakaya or emptiness or Prajnaparamita, or there's so many different ways in the many different traditions how that's called. There is it has an innate intelligence which we can participate in if we clear out everything which is in the way, And what is in the way is those sankharas, those habits of mind. Because we can't bear to feel, and we split off the energy and go in the head and tell us other stories about, the powerful Father God and the big mother who doesn't, who can just like serve, and serve. And all of those stories, which are now, we are coming to a point, in the history of civilization, where we start to realize, hey, it's all not really true. That was just like a certain historical zeitgeist, which turns out to be no longer functioning, and we need to leave it behind. Just like other ways of looking at the world have been left behind, like, when we snapped out of the fact thinking, that kings and queens, that they are endowed by God, to rule over everyone. And we start to realize, no, I mean, they're just like, family members from certain lineages who were very successful in exploiting others, And it's just like growing up, And I find that is really fueling also my interest, in my mind, because I want to understand, what assumptions are underlying my practice, and Buddhism itself is a very patriarchal system. The whole teaching has been controlled by male monastics, for 2,500 years. And the whole way how it has been, written down and passed on was certainly completely controlled by them. And that's okay, that's just the way it is. But as soon as you notice it and no longer caught and blinded from what's there, you can start to ask different questions, And that is certainly supporting you to not lose track of the supreme goal, because it brings a sense of interest, it brings a sense of, wow, I mean, that's amazing. It's like you live in a box like this, and then you step out, and then there's a bigger box, and then you step out, there's a bigger box, until one day there's no more box. But until that happens, I don't know when it's going to be, but you're on the move, And questioning your own cultural conditioning is very, very important, And yeah, it's incredibly important. And I feel, capitalism, racism, all of those things, that's all part of the cultural conditioning. And if you don't question those things, you're not gonna really realize the supreme goal, You're just being caught in being some kind of in a monastic or in a Buddhist theme park, And I don't want to stop there. I just want to go out of that box, Yeah. Okay. That's it, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ayya, for that inspiring answer.
Thank you.
It makes me want to move into bigger boxes. And
Yeah.
we've also been joined by a small black cat.
Oh, I see. I've seen that cat, isn't it? Was she there in April when I was there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's been with us since the beginning. His name is Stan.
Hello, Stan.
I think he's trying to bow. So, so we have another question from Kumu. So Kumu says, is there a sutta where the Buddha explained the tilakkhana together as tilakkhana, 3 characteristics? I'm reading the Majjhima Nikaya now, but have a lot more to go.
Well, I'm sure there's many, many suttas, but I'm not one of the people who can throw off sutta numbers. Like, I'm not like that. You have to ask someone else about that. But I think there's many suttas who speak about the 3 characteristics, because it's like the one way of expressing the essence of the teaching. Bante, would you be able to mention, or Ayya, a sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya?
Actually, one which we recite here every day is the Dhamma Niyamata Sutta, which is Not in the Majjhima Nikaya, it's in the Samyutta, I believe, but it's a short one on the topic. Yeah, as you mentioned, there's tons of suttas on the subject.
And also the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta certainly, is speaking about the three characteristics. The first sutta the Buddha taught, that's a very good one, because it's listing things, and you can really kind of go through that in your meditation. Yeah, that would be one I would recommend.
For that matter, also the second discourse, the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, also is applying the anicca, dukkha, anatta sequence to analyzing our experience. So that's also another one which does it very specifically.
Yeah. So those two, they are really helpful for that.
Okay, and we have another question. TJ asks, what was your experience in meeting Ajahn Buddhadasa of Suan Mok?
Yeah, that was wonderful. Good fortune, 1988, in April 1988. I have lived like about 5 years or a bit more in Thailand, and I had, in 1987, I've met in Burma, I've met some monks, who I kind of had a feeling, they know something which I would really also like to know. And I had that, not because they were saying anything, but the way how they were, the behavior was very inspiring. And because I was on a train in Burma, on a very long train journey in the hot season, and it was unbearably hot, and there were these two monks, and they had such composure, and I knew you can't fake it, I mean, it's real, So I was always looking over the like 9 hours trip or something, and I couldn't believe it. They were just so relaxed, and I felt like I'm gonna go crazy, kind of a thing, And then it burned itself into my mind, I felt like they know something, because nobody could fake this, But then, my life continued and so on. And then a year later, I found myself in Thailand, and I was at a bus station in Suratani, that's in the south of Thailand, and there was a relatively young, white guy with shaved head and all dressed in white. And I was thinking, what is this guy doing here? Because there weren't many Westerners traveling at that time. So I went over, and it turned out he was Austrian, which is also very rare to meet an Austrian person anywhere in the world, because we have not many people in Austria. So yes, he was Austrian. I said, what are you doing, wearing all white and having your head shaved? And then he was saying, I live in Suan Mok. It's just like less than an hour from here. You should go and have a look. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do that. And I jumped in a taxi and went there. And then I arrived, and they had every 1st to the 10th of the month, a 10-day meditation retreat for foreigners in English. And that would start like 3 days after I arrived. So then I thought, 10 days is a bit long. I don't think I can do that, get up at 4 o'clock and sleep on the concrete floor and all of that. But I just do a few days, and then I just squeeze out the back door. That was the plan. And my English was also bad. Actually, I didn't understand much. But again, Buddhadasa appeared, and I understood in a flash, but just by the way he was, the presence was just communicating so strong. And then maybe, I understood maybe like 50% of what was said in English. And I think, the Ajahn Buddhadasa's presence was like a huge mirror, which mirrored back my own capacity for walking the path. And it was like just, a very strong kind of a feedback mechanism, which can happen with a teacher, doesn't need to be a monastic, but any kind of a teacher, if there is some kind of, like sameness, I just don't know a better word, like a certain kind of compatibility. And, Ajahn Buddhadasa worked a lot with art in his monastery, and I had just left, basically the arts at that time. I was 35 when I was younger than that. I was 30 actually, And so there was a certain kind of resonance there, which was very, very powerful, I must say. And it reminded me of what I had seen the year before with those monks in the train in Burma, but it was even more powerful. And then there was a whole setup, there was these retreats for Westerners every month, and then you could also stay there during the retreats. And then I got a kuti there in the monastery, and there was opportunity, to sit outside of Ajahn Buddhadasa's kuti every day and just see him there sitting, not talking, but just being in his presence. And and I felt like that was like a tune-up, if you bring your car to the service, like all 5,000 kilometers or something. I felt my car was really in a total mess, my vehicle, my mind, so to say. And he was just like, by resonance, like also like when you tune an instrument, he was like the tuning fork, and his presence had such a strong resonance that I could just be there, and go through quite a powerful process of tuning up my instrument, And then he was already very old at that time. He was already mid-80s, and then it was clear he could not come out of his kuti anymore, and it was clear he would die soon. So then I thought, when he has died, I don't want to be there anymore, And then I was thinking, what should I do next? And then it was very similar to, when I met that Austrian man on the bus station. I went in the meditation hall, and there was this little book lying on the table, and I picked it up, Amaravati chanting book, UK. And then I said, okay, I'm gonna go there. And that's what I did then. I left, and he was already very sick. And then I became an anagarika. And in that night, where I became an anagarika, some Thais came. We always had like a midnight tea on the full and new moon days, and they said, Buddhadasa just had died in Thailand. So so he was very important. He opened the door for me, and he was just the right one, Somebody else I might not have heard. I might not have been able to get the message, but with him I did, So I'm very grateful for that. And by what I want to do next, with this earth room, I also feel very much standing on his shoulders, because he was using art to teach. And he was a very much one of the first engaged Buddhists in Asia. And also, just really very open-minded and, wanting to overcome just to be stuck in the culture and in the tradition, but wanting to have like a bigger outlook onto the, onto the ways how the teachings are communicated, and just being more innovative and using different means, to communicate the Dhamma, and trusting that there is more possible, than just, being in the thinking mind, using the intellect. Even he had also very powerful intellect. He was a translator. He translated the whole Tipitaka, into kind of what, in Thailand, they have very different layers of language. For example, the Dhamma language is kind of quite distinctly different from the daily life language, or the language which is used, on the court, on the royal court, is very different than the language which is used in daily life. And he translated the Dipitaka and using daily life language, which was quite scandalous at that time in Thailand, that he dared to do this, And he was just a very daring kind of a character. And he was called the enfant terrible of Thai Buddhism. And that also, I didn't know when I stumbled into the monastery, but years later I found out. And then I thought, I'm so glad it was him, because somebody else I mightn't have been able to surrender to, in the way I did, not by choice, but he just kind of caught me by surprise, and then it was already too late. Yeah, and then I kept coming back, and even became a nun, even I was really scared of that kind of commitment, because it felt like that's a bit much, but it happened. And I thought I'm going to do it very short, but I'm still one, so yeah. And now it's fine, I've gotten used to it.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question on Ajahn Buddhadasa. This one says, Ajahn Buddhadasa's work and reflections on Dhammic socialism have been very influential. What do you think would be a skillful way for monastics in the West to relate to current politics?
Yeah. I think, as a monastic, we can't really, give advice what people should vote or which party they should support. But I can say, that I would definitely say to people, I would really look into what programs, certain politicians have in regards to environment. Are they really acknowledging that, and are they, supporting decisions which are about, leaving the fossil fuels in the ground and doing everything what needs to be done in order to, to safeguard, nature. I think that's a very, very crucial thing. If a politician doesn't support that, then for me they are just like completely unacceptable, And Dhammic socialism, I think, Buddhadasa's book was very, very kind of, a very innovative and extremely daring, I would say, that somebody would dare to write something like that. And at the same time, it also has like a certain very patriarchal element to it. He speaks about the benevolent dictator and so on, So, to understand, Ajahn Buddhadasa is also a child of his time, just like we also are that. But he had a very big mind, because he grew up like in Chaya, which is a small village, about 4 hours north of the Malaysian border. And his parents had a shop, where they were selling everything from vegetables to books and school materials and so on. And he was helping out, and he was just like, when there was no customers, he would just read, And then he became a monk, like how it's traditionally done, for 3 months, when he was maybe 18 or something, and he never left the ropes, And very soon he gave very obviously, very good Dhamma talks, because people recognized that he had that gift, And I think, it's important for monastics to do not support individual candidates, but to say to people, go and vote. Please make use of your right to vote, because we cannot afford not to use that right, So this is what I think that's what we need to say to people. And then, support, because there's lots of, Dhamma organizations, 2 or 3, and I could send an email to Bhante Suchata and Ayya Soma with some information about that. There is like 2 or 3 organizations which are called like Dhamma vote and things like that, which support people going to vote, or people supporting organizations to write cards and letters to people in so-called swing states, So I think this is all work, which is which we can encourage, Yeah, and Buddhadasa, he was very respected because he did not shy away from speaking out, and that's why there were lots of intellectuals, from the universities in Thailand were coming to him because they felt like that he was really not stuck in Silabbata Paramasa, one of the first three fetters, and that he understood, that if you want to live the Dhamma and if you want to integrate the Dhamma in your life, you have to live it every day, not just like on the special day when you go to the monastery, or not just when you give dana to the monks, but you have to also take responsibility, for what you do with what you've got, and one thing we've got is we can vote, and I'm voting, even some monastics choose not to vote, but I don't see a reason why I shouldn't vote. But I'm not going to tell other people what they should vote. And I vote even in Austria and in America because I'm a double citizen. So I do that too. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ayya. And we have a question here from Richard. He says, I spend 90% of my day in bed due to a debilitating chronic illness of 16 years.
Oh.
Main symptoms are consistent body pain and extreme fatigue.
Oh.
I can only meditate sitting upright as a result. Most of the time, I am not able to go past 20 minutes. Any advice on the best approach to improving my meditation practice?
I think, 20 minutes, like 2 times a day. I mean, that's really great if you do that consistently. That's really very good. And I think, what one can say, without knowing you personally and knowing more about you, but what we could say is, try to meditate on some part of your body where there is no pain, so that your mind, because your mind will automatically be drawn mostly to the pain, I suppose, and then if you try to use another part of the body where there is no pain and stay with that as much as you can, that's a way, how you are widening and deepening your capacity to relate to your experience, because there is not only pain, there's also areas where there is no pain. That's what I would suggest, but it's not so easy to speak about the practice. I don't see you, I can't really feel you, how you are and where you are, but that's just a very from the top of my heart kind of a thing which comes up, but I certainly wish you all the best, and it's great that you can be here today.
Okay, thank you. And we have a question from John who says, would you talk about frustration? Is it based in the past, present, or future, or all three? How would you as a Buddhist nun address it?
I think, you experience your frustration certainly in the present, because there's no other way that you can experience the past or the future. So you experience it in the present, and I suppose, there is like a certain desire there about something which you want to be a certain way in the future. And because, that's jeopardized because of some reason, some person or some other reason, there is the sense of frustration. And then I think, it's just like important to first, you feel a sense of frustration in the body. It's a contraction, I'm sure, and then you go underneath and you ask, why is that coming from, and you'll find that there is some kind of a desire, or fear, or both, and then just like bringing mindfulness to that which underlies the frustration, and not judging it, just knowing, okay, for example, let's say I feel frustrated because, I wanted a certain thing to happen, because if that would happen, then I could bring some joy to somebody, so then I can feel, there was a motivation to benefit somebody else, but there was also like a certain amount of ego in it, because I wanted it to be done in that very particular way, and then just seeing both, seeing both the wish, for bringing something nice to somebody, and then the anger also which comes up because something happened which interrupted it, and if we can hold both, that means that we are not getting stuck just on one. Then there is like that sense, of being able to be with the paradox more, that it's very often, that things are not really clear cut, this or that, but they are dynamics, they are kind of depending on something, some kind of willful or wishful or wanting, which is if they are wanting or not wanting, and just like receiving that and allowing it to be there, not trying to get away from it, but just seeing that clearly, the connection between, if we are too attached to a certain outcome, we are very vulnerable to frustration and anger and sadness and all of those things. Seeing the connection and not judging it, but seeing the connection again and again, in the small and in the big frustrations, that will give us a sense of perspective. And then, the craving and the grasping is going to get washed out, through that more and more. And that's again, like the three characteristics, because you see, if you want to nail down the river, it's never going to happen, It's never going to happen. And if you build a dam in the river, there will be a lot of pressure, and that's nothing else but dukkha, So, so we can use everything for practice, the pleasant and the unpleasant and the neutral. But if there is frustration, it's like a wake-up call, hey, there is some kind of wanting there, and why is it? Where does it come from? What is it? That's how I would address it, Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And we have a question from Jay Kala, who says, I recently discovered Venerable Nagarjuna's writings on the Middle Way, and was shocked to see how right he was from an early Buddhist perspective. Do you have any recommendations for writings of his? Or would you say he is mostly explaining points the Buddha made in response to Abhidhamma and the suttas say it all?
I think, as I'm not a scholar person, but I'd say, the writings of Nagarjuna are basically based on, it's just like taking early Buddhist essential teachings, and taking it, expanding on it, and looking at it in many different ways, and working, I think, very much with that, what I just spoke about, the paradox, because the paradox is a way of shocking the mind into suspension, because the mind just can't, like, what, and in that moment, it's like a koan, also, you could say. And then the mind for a moment is just like wide open, because he can't make sense of it, And I think as far as I understand it, that's also like an element of how he has taken, that essential teaching further to kind of jolt the mind, It's like a jumping, like when you, I don't know how that's called in English, jumping board, when you go to, you're just leaping out. For a moment, you are in midair, and that's like a taste of the final goal, which is free, from all concepts. And the mind, we need many, many kind of skillful means to jolt the mind like this, and they have been developed in all traditions in different ways, like the koans in the Zen tradition, I would say, and then the Vajrayana is also very, very fanciful, to say the least, what they have developed in order to, exhaust the mind so it gives up, but with these very complex visualizations, for example, And so there's lots of other mantras, where you say like say you do I've done the Ngondro in the Nyingma tradition, where you have to do like 800,000 something, the mind just gives up, because if you want to know when you're finished with those, you can't know, So it's like, it's a skillful use of frustration, I would even say, And in the Theravada, the Vinaya can be a skillful use of frustration, if you have an appreciation for that, And I remember, Ajahn Amaroy at Wat Amaravati in England, he always said, like in the Vajrayana, you have the 100,000 prostrations, but in a Theravada, you have the 100,000 frustrations, of living a quite meticulous approach to the Vinaya and living it even in community, so that can be, that can be hard, that can really frustrate the mind endlessly. And then the art is, to not dry up and to keep the joy, that's why the joy is so important, So Silapata Paramasa, can be a real obstacle here, if you leave the Theravada approach of the 100,000 frustrations. So you have to be careful, It's an art, and I think Buddhadasa, he was really making that very clear, it's an art and a science.
Okay. Well, thank you.
And, it can be misused. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayya, for those beautiful thoughts, especially on the Vinaya as a useful source of frustrations. I completely agree. That's one of the most useful explanations of Vinaya practice I've ever heard.
Comes from the heart, because that's, I really think it's a pretty kind of direct way, of describing it.
And we have one final question for the evening. So this is our last question, and we're also almost out of time. So I think this is a great way to top things off. Andrea says, what is the practice of appropriate attention for beginners?
I would say, if I just, would just choose one, one signpost, I would say, notice whenever you want to be somewhere else, and when you want to be somewhere else than where you are, I don't mean like necessarily a location, but if you want to have a different mood, a different feeling, a different drink, a different whatever, that wanting always to be somewhere else, thinking the grass is greener somewhere else. And then once you're there, then you think it's somewhere else, because that habit is a habit of the mind, so you never arrive. And I think this is very much, part and parcel of being a human being, and with greed, hatred, and delusion. So it's not like that we beat ourselves up for it, because it's just, we have to accept it for what it is and wash it out through insight. but to really focusing on that, that wish. You sit down for the meditation. I want to have a different meditation. I want to have everything. I want it to be finished. I want it to start. All of those things, and just seeing that. And then you are, finally, then you get to that place, and then you're there, sit down for 2 minutes, and then you want something else because the habit has gone with you, And once you understand that, that's just like, then the practice starts, because then you have more capacity to be with frustration, and that's like this resilience and the capacity to be with that is essential, in order to go into the depths. And that's what the practice is all about. It's not about leaving things behind by just going into the Brahma realm or something like that. It's more like grinding down, like that. And I just want to end with one thing, which Asampasano said, which I often remember. He said, if you can't get out of it, you have to get into it. That's it, into it and through it, and come out the other end like a worm, like an earthworm. Yeah. That's the practice. Yeah, I think thank you for inviting me. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Ayya. This has been such a delight and joy. So I really appreciate you taking the time to discuss the Dhamma with us this evening.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Venerable. That was wonderful.
Thank you. And all the best, for Empty Cloud and all of your undertakings. And please, let's stay in touch.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So we'll end the session with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And
Thank
we'll
you.
see you next time.
Bye-bye.